When life accuses you, let gratitude and discipline anchor your faith in God's justice. Welcome to day 123 of the 180-day Bible journey. Today, we learn how to defend our integrity with faith, how to thank God for deliverance, how to love others through freedom, and to discipline ourselves for eternal purpose. In Job chapter 20, Job's friend Zophar gave a sermon on the wicked whose triumphant and joy is but for a few moments. His food will not digest well. He has oppressed the poor. So also his well-being will not be easy, and he will have misery. The earth will rise up against him. Human judgment at times without compassion distorts God's truth. In Job chapter 21, Job responded that the wicked, contrary to what we believe or think, do live well, and their descendants are well established. Their houses, their possessions, their animals increases. However, they are reserved for doom. Life's outcomes are not always proof of righteousness or sin. In Job chapter 22, Eliphaz accuses Job of wickedness by taking things from people and withholding bread from the hungry. He said Job dealt badly to the widows and also the fatherless. Nevertheless, Job should agree with God and be at peace with him. Then God will build him up and God will hear his prayers. False assumptions about suffering misrepresent God's justice. In Job chapter 23, Job declares that he wants to find God to lay his complaints and his petitions. He trusts in God, for he knows the way Job takes. Job said he has kept God's ways and commandments, and he will perform all that concerns him. Faith will always trust God even when he seems silent. In Job chapter 24, Job complains about the violence on the earth as the ungodly commit atrocities to the poor, to the widow, and also to the fatherless. The murderer, the adulterers, too, with their wicked deeds, all for a little while until they are no more. God's justice may seem delayed, but it is never denied. As we move into the book of Psalms, Psalms 124, David expressed gratitude that it was God who was with him that made them survive the enemy's attacks. It was God who made a way of escape. It was God who broke the snare. And as a bird, they were able to escape out of the snare of the enemy. Gratitude flows from remembering God's protection. We pivot into the New Testament, and in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, Apostle Paul acknowledged a fact that there is one true God, and that any other so-called idols, they are nothing to be concerned with, they are nothing to even take consideration of. Now, but when it comes to sacrifice or food offered to idols, then he said we should exercise our emotional intelligence about eating food that have been offered to idols. Even though we have opportunity to do that, we can do that because, hey, there's no other God but God. But some other people's faith might be still in the babyhood stage. Their faith might not be as strong as our faith, and their knowledge about these things might not be as strong as we are. So for conscience sake, we shouldn't eat things that have been offered to idol. Knowledge without love, it leads to pride. But it is love that builds up. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Apostle Paul discussed the right and the privileges. He has an apostle, but he has not taken advantage of it. So he won't hinder the gospel, and so he won't be a burden to other people. Paul made himself a servant of all men. so that he may win all for Christ. He is doing this to obtain a crown, to obtain a good report, so that he will not be a castaway from the gospel. Spiritual discipline keeps believers focused on eternal reward. And that brings us to our memory verse today in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27. But I discipline my body and bring it unto subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. It is our prayer that as we continue to be a partaker of God's ways, God's thoughts, God's methods, that his ways, the gospel will cleanse us, the gospel will qualify us, and we'll be able to discipline ourselves, our mind, our body, our faculty, to the glory of God. In Jesus' name. My name is Alan Olonshola, and I thank you for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and have a good weekend.